Okay, so I didn't record our lecture from last week, so I wanted to record this real quick just to go over the steps we went over. So if you remember, the week prior, we looked at line, circle, and square tools. This week, we're going to look at the rest of the 2D drawing tools. So the first one we're going to look at is Spline. Spline is more of a free-form drawing tool. You put in points and your line curves around those points. The more points you put in, the more control you have over where the line goes. And once you're done, you can push escape. And then these points can be moved. You can change where they're at. You can change how far the point is stretched along there. You can change essentially their location and what the tangent's going to look like around the line. You also see that there is a preview of what your line looked like before as you move these points around. As I mentioned in the lecture, this probably for any sort of mechanical drawings is not going to be as useful. But maybe for some more free-form stuff, if you're doing something a little bit more artistic that you're running into like a CAD program for you know, a CNC router or something along those lines, this might be useful there. Or if you're working on maps, or maybe you're trying to replicate a road system or a stream system that has some meanders in it, this function might be useful at that point in time. So we'll clear our screen here. And we'll look at the next function in the spline. You can do equations, which we're not going to do into, and style splines. So the other thing we have here is an arc tool. There's three different sections for the arc tool. There's the center point arc, the tangent arc, and the 3-point arc. So let's look at the center point arc first. Center point arc, you choose your center point, you choose the start of your arc, you pull it around counterclockwise, and you can choose the end of your arc. So there's your arc values there. Here's your radius over here, and your X and Y coordinates for your start and stop are at. So pretty useful. The other type of arc types we have a tangent arc. I'll show you that actually with the line tool here. If you're drawing on a line and you put in your second point, you can continue on at an angle or a straight line. If you go back to that point, it gives you this little circle indicator around your mouse pointer, and then at that point in time you're actually drawing a tangent arc. And as you see there, it shows your radius, it shows you the degrees that you've traveled around that circle, and then you just click again and there's your tangent arc. And from there you can continue out at a straight line, or you can go back and then you have another arc here. So pretty handy. Especially if you're rounding over ends. Also, like I mentioned in the lecture, a lot of times you're going to just kind of freehand some of your initial drawings and then go back in and give them values. So if you have something that has a rounded over end, you don't necessarily have to make sure your radius is exact when you first initially draw it, but this gives you a good starting point, and then you can go back and you can change the radius at that point. The third type of arc we have is this 3-point arc. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's like the center point arc, except for instead of choosing the center, you're choosing the start point, middle point, or start and end point, and then your third point is going to be your middle point, and that's going to change the shape of your arc as well as your radius. You can see as you move it in and out, if it gets to that dotted line, that way you know that you just basically did 180 half circle on that line. So let's clear this out. Delete it. We're going to look at our next tool, which is an ellipse. Once again, we have a few different options for the ellipse. We have the ellipse, the partial ellipse, the parabola, and the conic. So let's just do the regular start ellipse here. Your first point is your center point. Second point is one radius of your ellipse. And third point is the other radius of your ellipse. And there's your final ellipse. Once again, all of these values can be changed over here on the side, and your center point can be moved around. You have partial ellipse. Partial ellipse is going to have a center point, a start point, and an end point. And there you go. There's your ellipse. This also has two radiuses. You basically chose those when you did your center, your start, and your second point. You have a parabola, which we get a center point, and there you go. It works around that center point. So there's your center point, your start point of the parabola, and your end point. And we have a conic, which is just the opposite of that. So center, and we can move it around here. I talked about text when we did the lecture. Let me just draw some real quick just so that you can see. We'll draw a straight line across here. That works. And we can add in text. Over text there. We can there we go. We can grab it and move it. You can give it a relationship here. To this line. You can also go in and we can edit this text over here. You edit it by double clicking on it. If you want your text to snap to a line, you'll edit your text. You click over here on your curves box, and then you choose your line you want it to sit on. You can make it so it is center aligned to that line. You can spread it out over a line here. You can make it right aligned, left aligned. The other thing you can do is you can make it above the line. You can make it below the line. And as I mentioned before, you can reverse your text. As I said, this would be handy, say, if you were 3D printing a mold that you were then going to pour something into, say, like a silicone or a plastic, and you wanted the text to appear correct on your final part, your mold would then have all of its text reversed. So in here, you can choose your fonts. It's just like any other font. You can give it italics, bold. You can choose whatever your font type is, your size, just like any Word document. You can also give it bold or italics up here, and you can rotate it there. So that's pretty simple. And like I said, the way to make sure it snaps to the line is you click this little curves button over here, and you can choose your line. And so in that case, let's exit out of this so we have all of this step back a little bit. We'll delete this line. I'll draw in an arc. Right? And you can do the same thing here then. Go to our select tool, double click our text. We can click on this curves box here and then click on the line. There we go, it snapped to that line. And once again, you know, if you wanted it to loop all the way around, you can make it so it's justified across the whole line. And you can change it, you know, you can change things like that. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Might be useful in the future. All right, we have this arc slot tool, like I was telling you about in a lecture. This will be handy, especially once you're starting to do some extruded cuts or some bosses. This is pretty nice. This is a 3-point arc tool here. You choose your start, your end, and then whatever your arc is here. So, and that's also going to choose your radius. You can see there that there's a little plus sign there. That's where the radius of your circle is. If you pull it in there, you can see that we have a 90-degree arc at that point. So when you click the third time, that gives you the arc of your line. And then as you pull out again, it gives you the width of the slot you're going to cut. This can all be changed over here. You have your width of your slots. You have the X, Y coordinates for your center point, and you have your length, and you have your degrees that you're moving this. So you could change this. Say if you wanted to make this 90, you go 90. Yes. And then rebuild it. And there you go. So that's a 3-point arc. Delete that. There's some other features in here. You can do a center point straight slot, just a regular straight slot. So 2 points along there, give it a width, straight slot, pretty simple. Center point's going to be similar. Basically, say you had a center here, that's your center, and then you choose what your other end is. It will automatically give you your far end, and then you choose your width. And then you have a center point arc slot as well. So say you know where your radius point is. You pick your center point for your circle, your start, your end, and then your width. We have a polygon feature. Polygon feature here on the side under the parameters. You can choose what kind of polygon you want. You can number your sides. So we have an octagon here. We have the first one is an inscribed circle. So as we draw that out and click OK, it shows you that the circle that you drew on here is the circle. Your circle is on the inside and it touches the flat sides at this point. If we change that to a circumscribed circle, the circle is there, and instead of it touching the flat points and being completely contained inside of the octagon in this case, it is touching your points so that it is so the points are touching the outside of the circle. Also in there, there's a few other functions. So let's redraw one of these. You can see here that you have your X, Y coordinates for your center point, and you have the circle diameter, and you have the degrees in between your points that is going to determine how long those lines are. And then this last one is a fillet or a chamfer. Like I said, this is like a round over bit, say, or a chamfer bit for a router. If we have two lines here, we can choose this option here. It will base around the two lines you click on. You see what it does is it gives a nice little round over there. If you click the green check mark, then those values are taken in. It gives you what your radius is. It has a start point and the end point are on tangents there. Some of the things you can change in here are how big it is. And once you've done this, you can actually click back in and you can change where your start end points are for your coordinates, your center point, and what your radius is here. Step back here real quick. Draw in that line again. I went back a little too far. All right. The other options here is we have a chamfer. Once again, we're choosing our two lines. That gives us our chamfer there. We have an angle in this case. So our first distance that you see here, this 10-meter distance, is the distance from your point to the corner. And then your degrees is the angle from your start line to what the angle of the cut is going to be. In this case, it's 60 degrees, so we can change that to 45. It gives us a 45-degree angle there. Some of the other things you can do in here, as you're drawing this, say you might not have an equal chamfer on here. So in that case, we choose our two lines, right? In here we have a distance here. It's an equal distance. So because we have angle and distance, what we can do is just do distance and distance. And we can make it so they're equal, or we can make it unequal. And what this is going to do is we have our distance here from our point to our corner is 10 millimeters. And then from our point to the corner for the second one is 10 millimeters. We can change this value in here. So say that, you know, we have unequal distances there. And then that will let us go through and change how that chamfer looks. So the other thing you can do in here is, say we double click on this, we can take our dimensions and change them here as well. So we make that 25. And then see that stretches that chamfer out. You can do the same thing over here. Make that say 20. All right. So those values are also put into your smart dimensions when you create these points, and that lets you edit them here. And then the final thing we have is this single point for drawing sketches. And as you see, it's pretty basic. Just lets you put in points. But sometimes this is handy if you need reference points that you're going to, that you know your exact locations of, and then you're going to fill that in with other values. So drawing single points is sometimes very useful. Now we kind of get into some of the fun stuff. Though I want to do one last thing here before we get into extruding parts. And I didn't mention this in class, so I'll go over this again if you guys don't end up watching these videos. We did a thing where we had trim entities. Let's look at some of the features here that are similar to trim entity, but slightly different. So say you have a line here. You can go into extend entity, right? So you extend your entity and click on it, and it automatically extends over to there, and click on it again and it extends over to there. It did that based off of essentially you're extending to whatever your second closest line is. See, so since I put it on this end, it went over. It's a nice thing if you have some stuff that you just need to snap together real quick. It makes it very handy. So some of the other features we have this offset entity as well. And this lets you, so we have your values over here on the side for your parameters. We just made a second line that's offset by 10 millimeters. You can do it also bi-directional. That gives you a line on each side. And you can cap your ends too, which you can choose arcs, or you can choose lines to give you a square or a slot type cut. This is really kind of nice if you are, you know, a location of something and you need to offset it to give you, say, like a thin wall on each side, or you just happen to know where the center part of a piece is and you know its width, and this just lets you draw it real quick if you know it's equal around the ends. Handy tool though. All right, so let's delete all this. Let's sketch out a square here. We'll go to Smart Dimensions, click on this side. We'll make it 225, because why not? And we'll click on this side, drag it out, and we'll make this one 75. All right, so we have a square here, 225 by 75, right? Now we can go to Features, and we can extrude boss base on that. That takes our 2D drawing and lets us make it into a 3-dimensional drawing. So in here, this is letting us choose the width of the feature that we just created. So let's keep it 10 for right now, all right? We can choose our directions. We can go two directional, which then makes it 10 on each side of the flat feature we just drew. Or we can choose it to be a thin feature, this lets us draw up from that feature and gives us essentially a wall all the way around. You can see that here. In the yellow, this is basically projecting what it's going to look like once you say okay. So if I make that a little taller, that will be a little more obvious. The thin feature right now is drawing to the outside of the shape I drew. You can choose this button here, will flip that. Then it's drawing to the inside. Now we're back to the outside. We can make it a mid-plane. So in that case, it draws it 5 on each side of the line. Or we can make it 2-directional, which gives it 10 on each side of the line right now, but you can change what your values for the inside, outside around that line over here. So let's make it, let's go back to 1 direction, flip this around a little bit. And then we can also choose to cap our ends. When we cap our ends, that's just like it sounds, it gives us a value here on the top and the bottom. So we just went from an open shell for your walls to essentially a closed cube. And we can change those values here. We just say, okay, this is without the ends capped. You can see that you just get a nice thin feature here. Now, one thing you could do, say if you wanted to cap it at this time, you can select that face. We'll go normal to that face. We can go over here to our sketch feature, draw a rectangle, right? And then we can go to features and we can extrude boss base. Flip this around a little bit. See, there we go. And gives us our dimensions there. We'll just keep it 10 like it was before. Say okay, flip that around. Now you see you just have that one end capped, which is pretty handy. So that's how you extrude a feature. So let's delete this. Actually, let me go normalize to there. Back this way. All right, we're back to our sketch here. So we have just our line here. So we can go to our extruded boss base, right? Well, let's just make a single plate. So we're not going to do the walls. We're just going to do a straight up plate. So we'll make it 10 millimeters thick, right? So on that, we can do a few things here. So let's choose this front face again. We'll normalize to it so that we're not trying to draw at an angle or anything like that. This just makes it easier to draw. We can go up here and let's sketch just a circle on here for starters, right? So we'll go like that, and we'll sketch our circle. We'll give it a radius of 10. We'll say okay. Let's go to our smart dimensions, and we'll choose this distance here. I'll make it 20. We'll make this distance 20. That just puts our point you know, so it's lined up on this side. All right, gives us some values, gives us an idea where we're at. Now we have this point here is selected. We know, or this circle here selected. We can go to features again. We can extrude that. If we rotate around here, you can see it is poking out from that piece. We can then, at that point in time, give it a length. Save that. And we can say OK. All right. So there's an extruded piece here, right? Say a pin off of a sheet. Now, if you want to change that, you can come over here to the left-hand side and you right click and you go up here to edit feature, select edit feature. That opens up all of your original information for this again. Some things you might want to look at here is we have this draft. Draft lets you say you want a tapered point. This is giving us a draft of 1 degree. So if we, let me make this a little bit more obvious. We'll say like 5 degrees. Should make it a little easier to see. You can see there now that it is slightly smaller at the point than at the end. So if you had a tapered pin or a tapered piece, this is how you would draw that and give it the degrees. You can also draft outwards. So say instead of making a tapered pin, you were going to make something like a dovetail. Here, I'll show that real quick. We will click off, we'll say OK. And we will normalize to that face again. And let's draw us a quick rectangle here. All right. And then we can go to feature. We'll extrude this. We'll flip around here again so you can see it. Let's make it a little shorter. So say 20. Let's make it 10. 10 feels a little better. And then we can do, remember how we did our draft? Well, this is a draft for still 1 degree. Let's make this a 10 degree, so it's pretty obvious. See, you see it taper in like that. Once again, that's just a taper point, but you can draft outwards. We draft outwards, and we'll give it a checkpoint here. And you see there we've created a dovetail key off of that point. So when you're merging parts together or things like that, occasionally dovetails are a good way to join pieces together or to create slides. And this is how you would draw those dovetails. All right, so the final thing I want to talk about here is how to, instead of extruding a piece off of that base, we're going to extrude a cut. So let's go back to this face. All right, we flipped around, we're on that face. Now say we want it to cut a piece out here. And let's go to that arc tool that I was talking about. We'll just choose a 3-point arc slot. So we have our first point of our arc, our second point of our arc, our middle point, and then our width, right? And so let's give our width, we'll make that a 9 millimeter. So we have a 9 millimeter slot here, right? So then we can go up here, we can go to feature, and we can do extruded cut, all right? With our extruded cut, what we're looking at is instead of pushing out from the sheet, we're actually cutting into the sheet. So let's say OK for right now, right? And you can see what we just did there is we cut this arc into our piece of material, right? And this may be something, maybe you have a pin here, and then this arc, you know, the piece rotates around that pin. So You can also use this for creating holes, just straight circular holes. Hold on a second. Let me go back to normalized on this. You can do basically anything you can sketch up here, you can extrude out or cut in. So say we're going to do a circle here, right? It'll be clean. We'll give that a radius of 5. And we'll say okay. All right, so we just have a circle here. We can do our, then we go to features, and we can do our extruded cut. Currently we're set at 10 millimeters, which is the width of our material. But say we just want a blind hole. We don't want it to go all the way through. So in that case, we can go here and we'll make this value 5, or whatever the depth of our cut's going to be. But let's just say 5 for right now. We say okay. And now you can see we have created a hole in there, but it doesn't go all the way through. All right, so that's just a blind point. So say you had a pin on another piece that needed to line this up, that pin would then fit into that hole. So I think that's where we're going to stop for the day. It gives you a good idea of some of the tools. I know we went into some of the revolving boss bases and the revolving cuts in the lecture, but I think we'll cover those a little bit more in depth next week, and that way you guys can get a little bit better feel for how all of this is going to work. So for right now, I will send out an assignment. It will go over some of the stuff you saw here, and you guys can contact me if you have any questions. Thanks.